This is the Haibike XDURO Dwnhll Pro, one of the first mass-produced downhill bikes that's truly just capable. It's well balanced, it's got excellent suspension, awesome wheels, just the whole thing really premium. I want to acknowledge that I'm not like someone with a ton of downhill experience, so I'll do a walk around and call out some of the specs, but I have all the information, all the details back at the site. Definitely welcome you to chime in if you're a hardcore rider. So I think one of the cool things about Haibike as an electric bike manufacturer is that they really integrate the motors and the batteries and everything so nicely. So Bosch, as a Centerdrive motor, you can see this is the Bosch Performance Line CX. This is their higher torque motor, so 75 Newton meters versus 60, and it also just has higher power output, so sort of 50% at eco all the way up to 300%, and that's great because this bike's 53 pounds. It's probably going to be a little bit of bobbing. It's a soft ride, but you know, when you're climbing a mountain so that you can bomb it later, it's just great to have a motor and one that has that higher torque to help you out. This is 27.5 wheel set with Mavic D-Max wheels, bladed spokes, very cool, super lightweight and tough. Just neat to see that. High roller 2 tires, 2.4 inch diameter, really big knobs, awesome stuff. The brakes on this actually aren't what you would have, okay? So I know they say Dewar XT, and they do have sort of the floating rotor here, and it's really cool. It uses ice tech, so the inner portion of metal is aluminum to dissipate heat, and then it's got steel on the outside to be like sturdy and stiff. So anyway, the drivetrain and the brakes on the official bike would be Shimano Saint. So that's the highest end on the downhill line for Shimano. This is a 10 sprocket cassette in the back, 11 to 36 tooth, so you've got a decent range there. All of the Haibikes that I've seen to date, and really all the Bosch drive systems, only give you one front sprocket. Yamaha and some of the other mid drives will offer a couple, but then you add weight and complexity with the second derailleur. So Bosch has just opted for this single chainring, and they give the manufacturers the choice on how they want to set that up. So Haibike's opted for an 18 tooth sprocket right there. They could have had 16 or 20, but 18 is kind of in the middle. They've got narrow wide teeth on that sprocket and even a little metal chain guide right there to keep it on track. Back here, this is called a sprocket equalizing system. It's something that they've kind of come up with that's unique to Haibike, and it also has narrow wide teeth. It lifts the chain and kind of brings it up above that chainstay right there, maybe clears some mud a little bit, and it's supposed to reduce kickback. So as the suspension's performing, the chain shouldn't be slipping forward and backwards as much. So that's awesome. I've ridden these up and down at high speed. They really seem to perform well. And I mean, frankly, if you didn't have that sprocket equalizing system, like the crank would have to be higher. It would just completely change the geometry. So they've got the horse link suspension, so 4-bar suspension that's designed to sort of lift the pivot point a little bit. You might notice that also this Bosch motor is kind of tilted. It's just really brought in. That's a characteristic of the 2016 Gen 3 models. They say that they've got like 38% less visual size. I think it's kind of the same motor in size, but they're able to incorporate a little bit nicer into the frame, and again, that angle helps a little bit. So I want to call that out. It's sort of neat, and they've got a little plastic bash guard on the bottom, so it should hold up pretty sturdy. I haven't had or heard of many problems with the Bosch system. It's got a solid warranty on the Haibike. It's 2 years comprehensive, like I think maybe 5 years or a lifetime on the frame. I'm not really sure with a model like this. Still very cool. Awesome to see that suspension in the United States. The patent recently expired. Specialized held it before, and it just reduces bob and gives you a really nice ride. So we've got RockShox, looks like Vivid Air at the rear. No adjustments like climb, trail, descend, but you do have rebound and some other compression settings, things like that. Fox 40 factory. Huge fork in the front, double crown, so that makes it stiffer. They bring the stanchions a little bit higher. Love these little rubber bumpers that keep it from, kind of scraping your frame up. And then just really oversized tapered head tube up there. You can see that coming down to the front axle, they actually use a 20 millimeter axle. So again, really stiff. No quick release on this. It's sort of bolted down just to keep it extra sturdy. You do have rebound adjust down there, and that's even a protective cap, which is awesome. And then up here, we've got high-speed compression, low-speed compression. So high-speed compression would actually, I think it sort of sets like how high the bike rides, but that's designed for adjusting how the fork responds when you hit like a really like sudden sort of a high-speed impact, versus low-speed compression is when you're like on rollers and stuff, like how floaty is it going to be. Again, I'm not an expert, but I did some research on this just coming into the review, and I thought that was really neat to see a bunch of different options. My initial thinking with this was like, well, why don't they have lockout? Because don't you want to lock it out when you're climbing? But it doesn't actually bob that much. You know, once you're down and you're kind of like in the saddle pedaling, it feels pretty good, and you've got the motor to help you up. So this actually brings the bike into a new category of like, take it downhill when you wouldn't have to just walk the bike up or exhaust yourself all day just to get it up for one ride down, or try to take it on a chairlift. There are places that don't have lifts, or maybe they won't allow a bike like this. So this is just, it's kind of a freedom machine. I think that's really unique. So that's cool. Another comment on the motor here is that it offers 250 to 350 watts. And that sounds like, is that a lot? You know, in the United States, it could go up to 750. But in my experience, the torque is really great. It spins really fast, so it's like a 2-to-1 spinning ratio. Your pedaling cadence feels normal, but for each pedal stroke, it spins like twice, okay? So that gives the motor a more optimal RPM that it can operate with. A nice slap guard here on the left. The motor is also measuring your wheel speed. You can see back here with the traditional like bike computer magnet setup. Pedal cadence and pedal torque. It measures those 1,000 times per second, and it's just one of the most responsive systems I've seen. I'll put the camera back there, and hopefully you can see it in action yourself. It is a little bit sort of a higher pitch, like ring, ring. You hear it, but it's just that responsiveness is important for when you're on unstable terrain. Maybe you need to stop right away. This bike doesn't have motor inhibitors integrated with the bike brake levers. So when you pull those, you could potentially be fighting the motor if it wasn't so responsive. So I love that. Another characteristic that we were talking about earlier is how integrated the battery is. So you can see the aluminum, which this is all hydroformed, they kind of have these little flanges that surround the battery, and then they have this step-in system, so the battery kind of sinks into the down tube a little bit more, brings it lower in the frame, protects it if the bike goes down. And you can see this one has, this is put together almost to spec, but it's a little bit of a demo bike that came over from Europe. They don't have a lot of these out in the wild quite yet. So it's neat to get to see this thing in person. The battery pack only weighs like 5.3 pounds, which is nice. You could take it off pretty easily like that. Has a nice locking cord. You don't have to leave the keys in. And I think in the final version, they might have a little bit of foam padding right there to reduce rattling and just help it to suck into the frame a little bit more. 36 volts, 11 amp hours. Very cool. It's got a proprietary plug at the rear, which is duplicated down here on the frame, so you can charge this on the frame. You don't have to take it off, and that's kind of nice because it's just easy to drop or, you know, kind of clink around. Make sure when you put it back on, you click it. So I kind of heard it click. That way you don't lose the battery as you're going downhill. So to operate this bike, once it's all charged up, and by the way, here's the charger, 1.7 pounds, pretty compact little thing. One of the nicer chargers, in my opinion. That proprietary plug on the end. There's no extra dongles or anything. Easily fit in your pack. You're probably not going to be at a location where you can just charge up at the top of the mountain if you're really like backcountry. This does get pretty great range. I'd estimate like if you're really pushing it. In fact, let's go in here. They have sort of a little built-in estimator. If we arrow up to the highest level of assist, let's just imagine you're really scaling and you really want that support. If we press the I, it's going to take us to range. Okay, and it says 23 miles. So, you know, 20 miles up to, let's see what it says, maybe in tour 28, 30, 37. So, I don't know, 20 to 40 miles, depending on what level of assist you use, how much you're relying on the bike's motor versus pedaling yourself. But that's pretty good, you know, like a 20-mile ascent is going to give you an awesome ride down, and the system is just awesome. The way that it's balanced and everything too, bringing the weight low and center, having so many components on this that are stiff. I think this is 12 millimeter through axle at the rear. So just the whole thing is designed to reduce unsprung weight, bring the overall weight down with the lighter wheel set, give you a lot of control. So this is a KindShock seat post that's got a dropper, a remote dropper. You can press this right here and kind of sit on it and drop it down. So when you're bombing the hill, you won't, you know, hit yourself on that saddle. Very, very cool to see all those kinds of things. All the wires and things are run through the frame very nicely. So coming up to how you operate this thing, got the battery, got the motor, and everything's all set up. Now we've got the Bosch Intuvia display panel and little remote button pad. And the idea is that you could be holding onto this tightly, you know, handling the bumps and stuff, but still kind of operate this or select and change different readouts on the menu. This display is removable, and you know, if you're bombing the hill and you think you might lose control of the bike, it might not hurt to take this off. Like, the bike totally still works without having the display on it, but you can imagine if you go down on this with this plastic display, it could get banged off. They have been, you know, using these little low riser bars to have the display a little bit more inset to give it some protection, and then they offer different stems and stuff. This is a direct mount. I don't think that's the final version either. So again, that's one of the things that might be a little bit off, but that's just something to keep in mind with this and other electric mountain bikes that have a big, nice display. This thing is backlit, gives you tons of information. So we've got our speed in miles per hour. If you want to change that and other settings, you hold a reset and I, and it brings up the menu. And then you can press this I button over here to get all those other readouts. We got odometer, trip distance, clock, max speed, average speed, trip time, and then the range thing we were talking about. 4 levels of assist, so you just arrow up, and there's a nice little click when you do that too. Kind of hear it, so you don't really even need to look down. You can just sort of sense it, and you can really get to know the bike and ride it, feel like it's a part of you. And not every electric bike works that way. Like the Specialized bikes, they have the Turbo Levo, and they aren't exactly downhill, but maybe getting towards enduro and stuff. Pretty cool. They have a different drive system from Bros. It doesn't have shift sensing, and I think you're required to kind of operate the bike and change the settings down here on the frame. That might give you a little bit more protection than the Intuvia display that's mounted up here, but you have a lot fewer options, and it's not something that you can interact with on the fly in quite the same way. So definitely some trade-offs. This is an expensive electric bike, as you might imagine. I think it's $88.99, so we're almost at $9,000. But you're getting all those super high-end components and stuff. Maybe you have a couple of downhill bikes. Like, a lot of what's going on here is, you know, compatible with other systems. You could trade it, swap it. What you're really getting that's unique is that frame with that custom battery mount. And this is a gravity casting interface. They've really just tightly designed that and mated that motor to the frame. Pretty cool. So let's hop on this thing. I'll show you how the motor works and responds a little bit, and then I'm going to take it up and, you know, ride down some of these peaks. It's not true downhilling, but it should give you some idea of just, you know, how this thing performs and, you know, what to expect if you're thinking about buying it. Okay, so I came up here on Sport, which was like this, almost the highest. It's like the 3rd level up. It's giving me enough power to climb. This isn't super steep, but I'm also in 1st gear because this last section was a little bit steep. So I'm just going to hop back on and do that and pretend I'm just riding like normal. Yeah, I'm not having any problem. This is way less steep than what I was dealing with before. And I'm going right up. I'm just scaling this mountain, which is pretty cool. In fact, another cool readout on the display is you can see kind of the power meter just to the right of the different assist levels. And so right now I'm using maybe like 3/4 of the power, spinning pretty fast. And there's a new option here on the display. It's called shift detection, or maybe it's shift recommendation. Yeah, and there's like little arrows that pop up that say, hey, shift up. It's not super necessary, but kind of a cool feature. So yeah, I'm just riding in the saddle, no problem, heading up, and this will totally be fun to drop in a little bit. I might even shift up. Let's see here. There we go. Okay, so now I'm in gear 3, slower cadence. Motor's a little bit more quiet because it's not spinning as fast. I love that these motors have shift detection, because if you're shifting while climbing like I just did, you don't want the gears and stuff to get mashed. Although it is a higher end drivetrain, so it should hold up pretty well. Woo! There we go. basically topped the hill, and I wanted to show you again how quickly that motor responds. Just awesome. Really, just almost like flawless, the way that it kicks in and then pauses. So we did that whole thing at maybe like 7 to 8 miles per hour. Now we're up to 12, still climbing. It's just not as steep. And again, all that climbing was done in sport mode, which is, there's still one more level. You could go up to turbo, and it says our range climbing like that is like 21 miles. And that's after climbing up here. So I came from way down there in the town. Pretty sweet. There's our 20 right there. Motor shuts off. It's enough to get you going. down to 1 for the climb, but it's working pretty well. Choppy section right here on the way down. I'm not getting the same climbing power I was with some of the other Haibikes. I'm not sure why. Maybe I don't have the same, maybe the ring isn't as big. This is where walk assist would come in handy, but for whatever reason, it's been disabled on the US models. Yeah, I want the bike to push itself up, but it's not working. So I'm gonna have to push. Well, bit of a disappointment. Had to hop off there. Just wasn't able to climb it. I know this bike's slightly heavier than some of the others I've tested with the Bosch CX from Haibike. Maybe the gear range isn't as broad. I don't have the huge climbing ring. Did pretty well. I mean, this is pretty steep. I was having trouble even keeping the front wheel down on some of the other models, but I don't know, worth sharing. Otherwise, haven't had any issues. So I think it's a good time to hop on, enjoy that ride down. Definitely getting good brake power. Okay, we've done a couple miles in the last 10 minutes. The range, the odometer has dropped down a little bit. It's now saying 14 miles, so maybe we've used like 6 miles worth of our capacity because we were climbing like the whole way. Kind of cool, just to give you some idea of what to expect with this thing. Range is often sort of inflated, and then when you really put the bike through its paces and you're climbing the whole way, it drops a little bit. This thing has amazing braking power. The model that I'm on right now, again, kind of a demo model, has a 203 millimeter up front, 180 millimeter in the back rotor. So the website says 203 on both. I'm not sure if that's going to be the case or not, but they just stop so fast. I'm almost like, it kind of catches me off guard. And again, they're designed with that Ice Max like setup with the layered rotor, just to not overheat, because when you are coming down something really steep for a prolonged period of time, you don't want to have those. You don't want to have any issues with the calipers and things sort of melting or crumpling. They also, I'm told, will have those fins, so like the heat sink thing going on where it dissipates the heat a little bit better, which is really neat. That's the Dwnhll Pro from Haibike. Really love the Bosch system, so well integrated. They don't offer a true downhill bike like this from like really any other electric bike company I know of. There are some that look like it, that have long travel suspension and stuff, but just the balance, the stiffness, the quality of the components, this is really your best option, in my opinion. Great warranty, and I like the colors and the sizes, but it is expensive, and it does weigh more at 53 pounds than a traditional, like, true downhill bike would. So is it worth it? Do you have a place that you can climb up and enjoy the ride down? I guess you'll have to think about that. For the full write up on this, with all the extra, like, minute detailed specs and a geometry chart, I'll see you back at ElectricBikeReview.com. ElectricBikeReview.com. And of course, as always, ride safe.